Welcome to Frequency. I'm Chuck Ghost.
And I'm Jenny Fields. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture and employee experience, beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. And what matters this season is festive traditions. And I thought I would ask the question whether you have any festive traditions around Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, whether there's anything that is a tradition that you do in your household. Because we have a couple, and I didn't know if you had any.
We do. I'm going to share my favorite one, though.
Okay.
Which actually doesn't have anything to do with Christmas Eve or Christmas or Boxing Day or anything like that. It all has to do with Festivus, which is December 23rd. Anybody that's a Seinfeld fan, you're well aware of Festivus. And I began this tradition back probably 15 years ago, where it was the first time I had worked remote from a company. Guess what? There's no holiday parties to go to when you're the remote employee. And I recognized that this co-working space I was at, there were a lot of other either solopreneurs or remote employees that were there. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to host a Festivus lunch. And we do it every year on December 23rd, obviously at this place called Fat Dan's in Indianapolis. It's a group of 8 to 10, 12. It kind of depends on who shows up. Sometimes it's that one time a year that I see people. And sometimes we do an airing of grievances. We haven't really gotten into the feats of strengths per se. There's no physical challenges that have taken place at Festivus. But I just like it because it's this very kind of random thing that has become where people probably in about a week or so will start asking me, hey, what time are we getting together at Fat Dan's? I would not have talked to this person since December 23rd of last year.
Yeah.
But they're coming back. And I just love that it's sort of this community outside of a community that's kind of become its own thing somewhat randomly.
Love that. That's nice. I like it.
Yeah.
So we have one on Christmas Eve, which is an Icelandic tradition. It's called Jólabókaflóð. And it's linked to an Icelandic sort of folk tale, I guess, that where there was this big flood in the library and all these books were flooding the streets. And it's linked to that. So what you do as the tradition is you give the gift of a book and you make a hot chocolate and then you open and read your book with a hot chocolate on Christmas Eve. And my husband and I have done that we've been together 15 years. I think we've done it for 15 years. After we've watched Die Hard, which is also our Christmas Eve tradition, is we do a book exchange and have a hot chocolate.
I actually love that.
And I love
that. That's good. Because I love gifting books. One of my favorite things to give. So we might actually steal that from you. We're going to adopt that this year and see how it goes.
Good.
Can you substitute like champagne for like the hot cocoa? Like I
think you probably can. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
some bubbles on Christmas Eve is never a bad idea.
Bubbles any day of the week is never a bad idea. I'm a firm believer in bubbles every day is a good idea. I'm very into bubbles. So I'm fine with that. So what is on your list of articles for this week?
Well, this week we're going to talk about whether comms should battle with the C-suite over plans versus strategy, the new rhythms of work, and AI anxiety. But first, let's get into the quote-unquote luxury of psychological safety. HBR pulls from new research by Amy Edmondson and colleagues looking at more than 27,000 workers across a large U.S. hospital system surveyed before the pandemic in 2019 and again in 2021 at peak stress. The core finding, psychological safety is not a nice-to-have wellness perk. It behaves like a strategic resource. Teams where people can report mistakes and raise concerns about fear see lower burnout and higher intent to stay even when they're short on staff or tools. In other words, when material resources are constrained, social resources like psychological safety are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. The effect isn't just in the moment either. Higher psychological safety scores in 2019 predicted who was more willing to stick with the organization 2 years later, suggesting it works like kind of resilience savings account leaders build up before a crisis hits. The protective impact is strongest for physicians, women, and people of color who also report higher burnout. And the authors argued that the lessons apply well beyond healthcare in any industry in turmoil. The practical prescription is very human. Leaders being open about uncertainty, rewarding people for raising concerns, and treating speaking up as essential work, not an interruption. Jenni, do you think most leaders even know how safe or unsafe their teams feel today? And if not, how should they find out? Or do they even care?
I don't think they know at all. I don't think it's something people focus on enough, but mainly because I think we're too hung up on engagement and that percentage that I don't think we're looking at other things. I think we want that one hero number. And even though you could say, well, psychological safety is part of that and it's part of it all, it's not pulled out as a specific. And I think there's a conversation to be had about pulling out specific things that impact organizational success. What I like in this is the resilience mention. I think that's really important in terms of the fact that it builds that up. And I also like the fact that it's linked to lower burnout. So I think there's so many positives to it, but I don't think leaders are looking at it because I don't know that they know how to have that conversation. And I think it has been weaponized a bit. I think we spoke on this podcast quite some time ago on an article that Amy had also done for Harvard Business Review, talking about the myths of psychological safety and how people have kind of changed its meaning a bit. I'll see if I can find that so we can put a link to that episode in the show notes. But I think it's become a bit weaponized, which I think is a shame. Mm-hmm. So I think people have moved away from it. So therefore, I don't think they know. I think they will know from the symptoms they'd be seeing. So if they've got people who are being a bit apathetic or there's a lot of stress, burnout, all of the symptoms that we see when people don't feel valued and respected and like they belong and their well-being and all of those things, you'd see it in those numbers. Do they care?
The fact that you didn't even answer right away.
Yeah. Maybe it's because it's the end of the year. And I feel a bit fatigued by some things, but I don't know. And I mean specifically about how safe people feel. Do they care about whether or not people are enjoying their work or feel like they want to stay? Yes, I think they do. Do they care specifically about how safe people feel? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about when I was reading this, I know that said, I like that it highlighted this exists outside of healthcare. So as I was reading it, I was thinking about systems in place that can actually build psychological safety. And where there's Cooper University Healthcare out of New Jersey, Dr. Michael Kirchhoff, who I've spoken with in the past. He is both their chief innovation officer, chief patient safety officer, and is still a practicing ER physician. This guy is an absolute dynamo. But he also runs what they call their Good Catch program, where they encourage employees to catch a problem before it becomes the problem. And they highlight these good catches. Like they're people, it could be at all levels of the organization. And I think about that, like that sends a signal. Like we believe you, we want you, we believe like what you're seeing is more important than what we are seeing. Like we empower you to have that good catch. And I think about things like that as it can sound a bit ambivalent until you start building, I think, systems in place that actually coach that in and build that into the culture of an organization. I know there's videos out there of Dr. Kirchhoff talking about their Good Catch program. That can, again, happen in any single industry out there. It doesn't have to be healthcare where truly lives are on stake, but other industries, similar things happen. So I think that it's one of those things that leaders like to talk about, but I don't think they really truly understand the impact that that's having on the day-to-day life of employees at all levels of the organization.
Yeah. And I think that piece around when material resources are constrained, social resources like psychological safety are doing a lot of the heavy lifting is worth holding on to. Like that's the sentence I felt the need to say again. Like if you haven't got budget, you haven't got enough people, it's these social things that are going to help you stay together and survive. And if you're not investing in those, then you can't survive because we are social creatures. We have to belong. We have to be together. And I think that's just a very nice framing of that.
We're going to move on next to a LinkedIn post about why internal comms keeps getting stuck in task mode. Ecology member Regine Nelson argues that internal comms team hit the same wall in almost every organization. Leaders rush to a plan and skip the strategy. The result is comms is treated as a task service instead of a strategic function. Strategy is about how the organization creates clarity and alignment. Plans are about who sends what, when, and through which channel. When you blur the two, you end up optimizing invites, cadences, and town halls while never answering the bigger questions about focus, behavior change, and what actually deserves attention. She spells out the consequences of running on plans alone, where every request feels urgent, priorities change weekly, channels fill with noise, and employees ultimately end up tuning out. A strong strategy gives a clear definition of success, a filter to say no, and explicit links to business goals out there. Then a strong plan turns that intent into moments and messages. Regine's advice for stretch teams is pretty blunt. Pause the deliverables, confirm the strategy, then rebuild the plan with intention. If leaders cannot summarize the IC strategy in a single sentence, she says they probably know the content calendar, not the strategy. I'm curious for you, Jenni. Regine is basically saying, hit pause and reset the strategy when comms feel stretched. In your work, how realistic is it for comms teams to actually pause deliverables? And what is the first strategic question you would want them to answer before they start rebuilding that plan?
I think this is a great post. I think Regine hits the nail on the head in terms of that challenge. And I think the difficulty to answer your question about kind of how realistic is it, I think we make it feel like a much bigger task. And I was having this conversation with potential clients and existing clients over the last few months where we have done exactly this. They've sort of come and said, look, it's really chaotic. We're just, we're firefighting. We've got so much noise, all of these things. And someone said to me, like, how long does it take, though, to kind of get this under control? And I was like, we can do this in like 2 weeks. Like, this doesn't need to be a very long process. Even if you don't have external consultants to help, you can still pause and reset and do this in a couple of weeks with, some conversations on half a day and then a full day workshop, and you'll have it sorted. That one question for me is, what is the purpose of your function? And that's the question I always start with when I'm doing sessions with teams around internal comms and trying to go from chaos to calm and all of those things. It's always, what's the purpose of the function here? And I've got about 5 different examples of different purposes of internal comms functions of different sizes in different industries, because they're always different. But if you can't nail that in terms of that advice from Regine about if a leader can't summarize that strategy in a single sentence, if they can't say what the purpose is of your function and there's alignment on that and you're aligned to that, then you're just going to be in chaos. So that's always my first.
Yeah, I love that part about putting that strategy in a single sentence as a bit of a, I won't say a test, but to see if they know. I would like to know if comms people can put their strategy also in a single sentence. Because if you can't, they certainly can't.
Yeah.
And if they can't, then that's an opportunity to work with your leaders. And I think at times we've done ourselves a bit of a disservice by kind of mixing these two things together between strategies and plans and not keeping them, not separate, but distinct from one another, where like your strategy shouldn't change all the time, but your plans can.
Yeah.
Like the plans can evolve pretty quickly. Your strategy shouldn't be locked in, like chiseled into stone, but it should be pretty structured.
Yeah.
At least on an annual basis.
And I think that's where the purpose bit comes from for me, is like, what is it we're really here to do? And then what are we doing? Because if you don't have that purpose piece, you're going to spend all your time, doing some of these PowerPoints or stuck on intranet content, and you might love doing that. And that might be exactly what you think you're there to do. And that is cool, right? If that's what your function needs for the organization, that's great. But if you're doing all of that and they need something else, then your strategic alignment is just totally off. So I think that's always the bit to get right.
We're going to move along now to how hybrid reality is reshaping employee experience. Leisman's new Rhythms report looks at more than 1.5 million employee responses and basically says hybrid isn't chaos anymore. It has a pattern. The big 3: commute, presence, and the actual work being done. Short commutes are an engagement superpower, with satisfaction in the 90% range for sub 15-minute journeys, dropping it to roughly a third for 2-hour treks. Attendance has settled into a middle lane, with about 29% of people in 2 to 3 days a week and only a small minority fully office-based. And Thursdays quietly become the new peak day in offices around the world. Benelux and the Nordics are getting the balance right often, and UK and Americans are lagging. Work itself has shifted too. Since 2019, video calls have jumped in importance while traditional phone calls have faded, and employees are putting more value on creative thinking and learning from others. Collaborative roles consistently report higher satisfaction with the workplace than solitary ones, which reinforce a simple idea. Offices work best as hubs for connection, not rows of individual desks. Leisman's line is that every organization is now an orchestra, and leaders need to conduct different rhythms rather than force everyone onto the same beat. Jenni, if Thursday is already the new peak day, what's the risk of leaders piling every town hall, team meeting, and social moment onto Thursdays?
I think the risk is probably quite high, to be honest. But I think Thursdays have been the peak day for anybody working in London for the last 20 years, if I'm honest. There's definitely been a culture in the city. I mean, I worked in there for 7 years, and Thursdays was always the day where people were having, in the office, and then there might be drinks, or it was always the social day because everybody would be in the office, less so on a Friday. So I think there is a danger, but I think there is more to be said about this report in terms of what there's some big stuff in here, I think, in some of the numbers, like the 90% satisfaction rate of a sub 15-minute journey. Like, I mean, where are you walking to? Like, or driving? Like, that's really, that your world becomes very, very small if that's your world. And I always think about what you said on the podcast ages ago now, I think, which was about kind of inconveniencing yourself for others. And, I did a speaking event the other day, and it took me 4 or 5 hours to get home from that, and I had a great time and it was brilliant. But if I was in this, well, I'm only going to be doing 15-minute journey, my world becomes very small. And I think that's a risk to actually how people feel. And I'm just going to say that the point about chaos, it's not chaos anymore, and there is a pattern. As someone who's written and researched a lot about chaos when I was doing my first book, chaos always has a pattern. And that's kind of the point in chaos theory. But I do think we need to think about the cadence of our communication and our events, and think about how that flows out throughout the whole month. And you can't overload a Thursday, because actually that's the day to come together and have a good time. But you can also do that on a Tuesday. And if you start to only do it on a Thursday, then people are only going to come in on that day. And I'm not sure that's what you want either.
No. The line is, inconvenience is the price we pay for friends and community.
Yeah.
I think this says people aren't willing to have work be the inconvenience.
But I think that depends on your relationship with work. Like, some people will be happy for that to be their inconvenience.
I think 15 minutes, if maybe this is geographically speaking, 15 minutes, I could actually be pretty far. Like, I live on the outside of Indianapolis, and I'm a 20-minute drive into downtown Indianapolis from where I live. We all don't get to hop on trains all the time like you do. Jenni.
Yeah. See, whereas 15-minute drive for me, I'm not really
Yeah. So I think
sure
again, if you're rural, if you're in the US and you're rural, that's not realistic. But also these 2-hour treks that people felt like they were sucked into pre-pandemic, and then pandemic, like, oh wait, we don't need to do these. I want to be these like hour in the work, hour back, or 2 hours in, 2 hours back. Like, we don't need to do this. And now workplace was like, nope, we actually think you do. That's that inconvenience that I think they're saying this doesn't need to be an inconvenience anymore. And so I do think about that, the rhythms, and how as comms, because we have this curse of access I like to talk about, where we interact with a lot of people across the organization, trying to pick up on what those rhythms are. Because some rhythms might be working quite well together, and some might be conflicting with one another. So being able to say like, hey, we're doing a lot of this stuff on Thursdays all the time. Maybe we need to switch it up. Not saying that comms need to be the event planner, but be the voice that's like, hey, let's make sure we're balancing this out the right way for everyone. And
this comes back to making sure that you're strategically organizing these things, right? To the point we just mentioned from Regine about not just doing the plan. Like, if it doesn't make sense for it to be on a Thursday from a content or strategic perspective, and you're only doing it because you know people are in the office, like, that's not a good enough reason to do it. It has to be more strategic than that. It has to fit around other things. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting report. I also think it's interesting that it's saying that the UK and Americas are lagging. in terms of this shift from office-based stuff. I wonder when we will catch up.
Moving along now, around why AI at work makes us so anxious. This HBR piece by Maura Ahrens-Mealy says AI anxiety at work isn't people being dramatic. It is a sane reaction to a huge, fast, messy change. Leaders can see the upside of AI in saving time and boosting creativity, yet many also worry about their own relevance and don't fully trust how their companies are rolling it out. On top of that, they're expected to keep everyone calm while their teams sit on a spectrum from this is exciting all the way over to this will replace me. The article boils the discomfort down to three things: feeling out of control about the speed, fearing work will lose its meaning, and trying to avoid heavy emotions. Instead of powering through, the author says modern leadership means naming and working with that anxiety. You can't slow AI, but you can get specific about what scares you, whether you trust your company's AI strategy, and how your team actually feels about it. From there, the job is to act in line with your values, even if you can't control the tech. It is less about promising, don't worry, nothing will change, and more about offering grounded, honest leadership while everything else is changing. Jenni, if we can accept AI anxiety is logical and not resistance, how should companies change the way they talk about AI rollouts so people feel heard rather than just managed?
So I read this and rolled my eyes as much as I could, because this, for me, I honestly, and even hearing you kind of talk about it, this is just change. You could take the word AI out of this and it's just change. And it's still creating this fear about AI. Like, the headline of the article is around why AI at work makes us so anxious. Why change does make us anxious. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's AI, whether it's changing the entrance to the office, whether it's moving to a different office block, whether it's being bought by a different owner, whether it's merging. All of these things make people anxious for all the reasons that this explains. It's got nothing to do with the fact that it is AI. It's got everything to do with the fact that it's change, and it's poor change management and leadership in organizations. And I understand that part of that is because of the pace and the fact that it's so accessible and all of those things. But we have to get a grip on it. And if you haven't been doing change well at all, then you're definitely not going to do this change well. So to answer your question about how should companies change the way they talk about AI rollout so people feel heard rather than managed, do change well. Like it's all there. Change theory, change programs, all of that teaches you how to do this properly. So that people will feel anxious, right? They will. It's change. It's how we're wired. But if you communicate effectively and you follow the work that's already been done to help people guide them through change, then it will be a lot easier.
I think you're a little bit right on this, but ultimately mostly wrong on this, Jenni. And here's why. You're right about the change part. Right about the change part. I think you're minimizing what this change means to a lot of people. This isn't your desk is moving from one side of the building to another, or a door is moving, or whatever. This change has a name and is getting a lot of attention. And there's this fear, right or wrong, there's a fear that people are wondering, am I going to be obsolete? This is not just a comms concern. There are finance people, there are HR people. I keep nodding along. People have named this fear, so it's very real to them. And I think companies should acknowledge that there is some anxiety around it. I am not anxious about AI. I am excited about AI. It has allowed me to do so many more things out there but I'm in control of that. I'm not having it injected into what I'm doing, whether I want it or not. And I think there is that anxiety out there that people have because they can name it.
Okay, so I had lunch with my dad the other week, who is 75 years old and has worked in companies and run companies. And we briefly touched on AI, which he's equally excited about. And he said at the table, I have worked through at least 4 technology advancements where it has been fear of losing your job. And he was like, this one to me is no different, right? but he's retired, right? So he can say that. But as you were talking, I was like, people have worked through this already. Like email is going to make something else obsolete.
Some groups have, not all
no,
groups have.
I think the internet. I think if you think about how the world has changed with technology, every time there's been a significant technology development, people everywhere will have been worried about their jobs. People who used to courier things from country to country no longer had am I still going to need to have a job because there's now email? And actually there are still people that do some of those things in different capacities. So I don't think this is the only technology advancement that's impacted everybody. And I'm going to go away and check, because I think there have been other technology advancements that have come into the workplace that have impacted everybody, or people have been made to feel like it's going to impact everybody, and it has made people anxious. And I think that is just change. Whatever is coming in that's going to make something different is going to make us feel anxious. And I don't think AI is the first thing to come into organizations.
I don't think anybody is saying it's the first thing. I don't think anybody's saying it's the first thing.
You just said there was nothing else.
No, I never said nothing else. We'll go back. We'll run the tape on that. Basically, but if you are in your early 20s, you were not at work when the internet showed up. You just grew up with it. So you did not go through that change.
Yes.
This is the next change. Your dad has been through 4 changes. We've probably been through 2.5, maybe somewhere around there. Like it's not every year there's just kind of big monumental shift. When you think about the internet launch, that was 25 years ago. 25 years ago. So if every 25 years there's a big shift, yes, everybody at that time was going through it, but people going through this change now did not go through that change.
Yes,
before.
True.
Some of us did. Yes. Some people did not. So I think it's not just we're launching this new software. Here's a change program to get everybody using the new software, or we move buildings. This is impacting people's careers, I think, in very positive ways, potentially very positive ways. It's not worth fear-mongering about it, but I can understand the anxiety that people have because they don't fully understand.
But okay, I will agree, and also I'm going to carry on. So I think we do agree on this around the fact that this is a significant change and that the anxiousness around it needs to be addressed. But again, I would say that about any change. Like if you were going through a redundancy program, if you were being bought by somebody else, there are still all those same concerns, because that might be the first time you're going through that in your organization or wherever. It feels like the root of this is, if it's the first time you're going through some significant change, then it's going to make you feel anxious. But I think that should be addressed with every change. I'm not saying that a change program should be, a tick in a box and work through it. I think every change program should consider that human element and how people feel, and that concern and that worry that we all naturally have. And I think if you don't talk about that, and it's certainly every time I've gone into organizations and talked about the impacts of change on us as human beings, people suddenly breathe a sigh of relief and go, oh, okay, actually, I'm not going mad. And actually, we all feel like this because it's how we're built as human beings. That needs to be talked about, definitely.
I think about the way my mind worked trying to come up with an analogy for this. It's sort of like if you're on the beach, waves come and go, like waves are kind of coming in and out all the time. Then there's the tide that kind of changes everything at that point in time. And I think this is that tidal change. It's not the waves coming and going and splashing in. It's this tidal change that's happening across all businesses at the same time, across all professions. We need to save this for like an in-person conversation on that.
I'm excited for that.
Anyway, that's what we have for this week's stories. Jenny, what are you freaking out about?
So I'm freaking out about doors, and which sounds a bit weird, but I was with a client the other day, and we were walking back from lunch, and there was just a really cool door in front of us, and I had to explain to her that I have a separate Instagram account for doors because I quite like them. I find doors quite interesting in terms of what's behind them. Why have we chosen that door? And now it's got to the point where people send me doors when they're away and on holiday for me to enjoy. And I thought I'd own my space in my weirdness of doors. So it's Jenny Finds Doors on Instagram. And I just share doors.
Have you heard the internet question of, in the world, are there more doors or wheels?
Yes.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I love to think about that.
Yeah. I find doors just like, why have you chosen that door? Like, why was that door chosen? And then like when you're somewhere, like when I was in Morocco, I think it's where it started. But when I'm somewhere where there's a lot of history, it's like what's behind the door and who's walked through this door? And yeah, I'm all full of mystery. So that's mine today.
My freak out isn't really a freak out, I guess, as much of it is kind of an acknowledgement of now being 50 years old. And as I mentioned on the last podcast, my dad did not make it to the age of 50. And here's the thing is like, I don't know what you're supposed to feel like when you're 50, but I remember as a kid seeing 50-year-olds and thinking like, wow, they are really old.
Yeah.
But like, I don't feel old, but I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. And I'm never like, my 30s were great, 40s were great. I fully expect 50. Like there's no doom and gloom when it comes to being 50. In fact, I'm quite looking forward to this because I was thinking like, man, in the next 10 years, like both of our kids will have likely graduated from college. They'll have their own life because they're thinking about what was the last 10 years like and their spectrum of things. So I'm just very excited over what the next 10 years is going to bring in my 50s.
I love that. I think that's how we all feel with every milestone, isn't it? Like looking back over that decade and maybe like, if it's like, how am I supposed to feel? Maybe it's like, what am I taking forward into the next decade and what am I leaving behind? And maybe that might help with how am I supposed to feel?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Well, thank you all for joining us this week. All the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes, and do not forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone you think would enjoy listening or watching, because you can also find us on YouTube. Thank you to my friend Poet Ali for contributing music to the show. We're back every Monday with more news, insights, and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.